mention something. The January State of the Union address, that might have been a grand computer-generated image production.
You know what?
Recent State of the Union address by the Biden show.
Yeah, I completely.
You, the deception is amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just I'm completely open to that, Jim, and part of it is if you look at the way artificial intelligence AI has really been unfolded, over the last few months to the public, whether it be on social media or some of these platforms. And the rate that they did it makes me wonder, what nefarious plan do they have, with AI? Is it so when certain evidence starts to surface about them, videos or photos of incriminating, satanic occult, or pedophilia type things, they're gonna, oh, well, it's AI, and everybody's like, well, maybe it is because so much AI has been out there that they try to use it as an excuse. Like there's just, you nailed it.
I don't think they're going to blame the nefarious deeds on AI. What they're going to do with AI is put you out of a job.
Then no job means how do you survive? And maybe that's what they want.
We've been through industrial revolutions before. Here's a nice little trivia piece for you. I think it was the late 19th century, and it was in England, and it was in Western Europe, and it was also in the East Coast of the United States. We had the Industrial Revolution, and a very good example of that was the textile mills. They became automated. Here's the trivia question. What's the origin of the word sabotage? Because it really took root in the revolt against the Industrial Revolution. We'll have to adapt to another Industrial Revolution, and it's too bad that so many people will be without skills in the new economy. But what is the origin of the word sabotage? This is really pretty good.
I'm going to go out and guess that these workers that were being replaced with these text mills said, let's go break these machines.
Well, yeah, but the word sabotage. Okay, I'll just say it. I don't mean to put you on the spot too badly. The French word for shoe is sabot, S-A-B-O-T. What they did was they threw wooden shoes into the industrial machinery. They threw wooden shoes and shut down the plants, the textile mills. The mills with the new machines in the late 19th century that put thousands of people out of work. So what did they do? They came back and they just tossed wooden shoes into the works. Sabot, sabotage. It's French. Okay. We're seeing a different, more pernicious movement now. AI, I marveled at something. It was 25 years ago. Wow, I could put my credit card in that little slot and say I want $15 worth of high-test gasoline, and the machine will allow it, and some guy doesn't come out and bother me and maybe drool on my windshield or whatever. Okay, that was progress, and that was automation, but not AI. AI can be very disruptive, like high school kids are using AI to do term papers. Okay? I call it GPT. It stands for generated program something. I can't remember. AI is going to put people out of work in a very big way. Amazon is a leader in this. They're not the only one that's been making great strides, but they're making their, I don't call it an assembly line, their delivery automated line. I'm not even sure what they call it, but the orders come in, they get filled, and off it goes into the ethos for mail. They even experimented with robot drones to do a delivery by air, like a little helicopter drone drops in on your front door and puts the delivered item there. Okay, AI is going to be much more disruptive than the Industrial Revolution was 150 years ago. I'm kind of worried about it because at the same time, they're saying we have too many humans. By they, I mean the cabal who think they own the planet. They think that they are our landlords. I call them the Uber lords. It means the overlord. It's German. Uber, Uber lord. Yeah. In other words, they think they can tell us exactly what to do and who has to die and who has to pay them taxes for a fraud called climate change. Here's my response to climate change. And I mean that in a very Christian sense. John Kerry is a big fat moron. I hope he gets executed. Okay, these guys are involved with fraud. Wouldn't it be a horrible accident if a rod of God fell upon the next climate change conference? Wouldn't that be a shame to leave them in a quarter-mile deep hole? Okay, these people are criminals. We have a criminal class, elite class, running things. And this is not new. What's new is that the internet has revealed them. The internet, okay, some people say, oh gosh, I don't want to do that because DARPA developed it. Well, DARPA developed email, you idiot. How's that working out for you? It's pretty nice. Email is wonderful. I do emails every single day. They're wonderful for managing a business, keeping contact, sharing information, sharing pictures, sharing jokes. My gosh, and sharing pictures like this new Russian model. My gosh, I'm not sure what her name is. Kim, I think. All right, the internet is wonderful, but some people say, oh, Bitcoin was developed by DARPA. It's no good. It's all dirty. Well, the US dollar was developed by the cabal, the Federal Reserve note. Is that dirty? Yeah. Do you use it? Yeah. You take a paycheck in it? Yeah. You pay your rent with it? Yeah. Well, we're stuck with it. It's legal tender. Okay. The fact that it was developed by an evil camp does not make it nefarious or useless or something that should be prohibited and banned. It means you have to be careful. There isn't a single development in the world that doesn't have a corrupt side. Let me turn that around. Every single developed item in the world has a corrupt side. I mean, even a push cart in Manhattan selling hot dogs, that has a potential for being nefarious because they might possibly be selling cocaine at the same time. Okay, you just got to be wise. You got to be careful. Anyway, sorry for being. I get a little nutty. I get a little emotional and a little nutty.
Emotions are good because they come from a place of passion, and it's true. I'm out here in California, and I know how much you love California. And we have these like little fruit carts, and everybody wants. Well, yeah, there you go. But these fruit carts, people want to go buy mangoes or fruit, and it's something that seems good, but people don't realize that the person working behind it, someone that's a victim of human trafficking. They're trying to work off a debt, that brought them into this country legally. So once again, it's that dark side of something that exists. And speaking of California, Jim, why don't you give us a little take? What really happened in Silicon Valley not too long ago with these banks?
The Silicon Valley Bank. It's quite interesting. Notice that Silicon Valley Bank and a couple of other big banks, First Republic and First Heritage, and all the rest are pretty small. Silicon Valley Bank is really the only big bank that entered failure. There are two more good-sized banks, but golly, what got the press? What got the publicity? If you dig down, you'll find that New Hampshire and South Dakota have been entry points for Mexican money laundering. And I don't mean like $20 million and $52 million there. I mean like billions. billions. And what it means is that the governor Sununu of New Hampshire is dirty, dirty, dirty. And all of his buddies are dirty. By that, I mean corrupt. They're part of the cabal. They're part of a narco network of money laundering. What happened at Silicon Valley Bank is that the white hats, the white alliance, now I'm going to use that term perhaps more than a few times. It's the good guys. It's the ones who want to restore the republic. It's the ones who want to remove the Nazis who are operating in the Democrat Party. The Biden show, the cabal, the banker cabal. It's much bigger than banker now. What happened was that the White Alliance chased down some big money that was moving into the West Coast banks and aligning itself with Chinese interests. And they chased it and isolated Silicon Valley Bank. And Mike Gill, a very brave fellow, has been the warrior behind this. He's been the analyst to reveal most of the information. And I wish him the Lord's protection. He needs a shield of faith to protect him, because he has outed a lot of very evil, not so much people, but channels and organizations. So when they isolated Silicon Valley Bank for movement of billions and identified its alignment with Chinese interests in Northern California, the Sinaloa cartel of Mexico quickly moved something on the order of $30 billion out very quickly in, I believe, a 1 or 2 day period. And that left a hole that could not be filled. I don't know where the money went. I think it went to Mexico, but it might have gone to Arizona banks, because that state is completely locked down by the Mexican cartel. So what you had at Silicon Valley Bank was an identification and a near capture of a large amount, $30 billion of Mexican drug money. And they shut it down. They shut down the bank. There have been some interesting consequences of the Silicon Valley Bank and the follow-on events, Alpha, that was quickly in occurrence. It caused a chain reaction where other banks, I mentioned First Republic, there was First Heritage, there was Signature Bank, there were a couple of other ones, and they're mainly smaller banks that a lot of Americans really haven't heard much about. They not familiar, but that's okay. It doesn't mean they're nothing. It just means that we got 50 states, and maybe only people in 3 or 4 states know about that particular bank, but whatever. My important point to bring to bear is that Janet Yellen, that little cabal creature who used to be a pretty good banker in the early 2000 decade, she called down Alan Greenspan on some spurious, bad judgment policy. Janet Yellen made a policy statement around May of, was it last year that Silicon happened, 22? I think it was. I think it was,
it was last year.
Ooh, gosh. It wasn't 20. No, wait, was it 23 or 22? Was it 23?
No, 22. 22.
22.
All right, I'll double check.
That's 2 years ago. Okay.
Oh yeah, we're in 2024 now. You're right.
I think it was. I think it was 22, but
Nope.
March. I don't know. I can't.
No, it was March of 2023. Yeah, March of 2023.
Okay. All right. So it was less than a year ago. All right. Okay. The point to bring to bear is that Janet Yellen made a statement after the next failed bank and then another failed bank, that the Department of Treasury would use unlimited funds to bail out, and she didn't use the word bailout, to back up depositors. The FDIC would be with unlimited funding to back up the depositors who are at risk in the failing banks. And what it does is it creates a bank that's a zombie. So the bank could get bought out, but then it makes a bigger zombie. We've got a remarkable sequence of events, Alpha, where J.P. Morgan was designated by Janet Yellen to be the super bank. We want J.P. Morgan to be the acquiring bank of dozens of banks in trouble. She said that. And then after 2 acquisitions, they stopped. And I have an analogy. What happens if you're suffering from food poisoning and you get another tainted papaya? You get doubly sick. Okay? What happens to an insolvent bank like JP Morgan when they do an acquisition of a very badly insolvent bank like Silicon or First Republic? They get very sick. And what happens is, in a financial sense, they get a case of extreme insolvency and constipation. They have to create a category called bad bank. They have to put bad assets in the bad bank accounting class and decide, what are we going to do with these things? Are we going to try to sell them for 40 cents on the dollar? And if that doesn't work, sell them for 15 cents on the dollar? How do we dispose of all this paper rubbish after acquisitions? So after a couple of acquisitions, JP Morgan stopped in their acquisition trail. Very important point, which means that Janet Yellen has adopted a policy where she's going to back up the banks with solvency funding and permit them all to be dead, hollow reeds that do not serve anything as lending institutions. What we're going to see, Alpha, is hundreds of semi-large and large banks that are dead and zombies and don't lend and maybe become somewhat predatory, like grabbing onto a commercial property because they can't roll it over and get a new mortgage. They're not going to lend. So we're going to be in a zombie economy with zombie banks and zombie lending. That is where we're heading right now. I've got a forecast. We're heading into an inflationary depression. In fact, this might shock a number of people who are operating with blinders and very low mental capacity. We're in an inflationary depression. They're calling it a very slow, sluggish growth. But they're lying to you about price inflation. It's really about consistently 7 or 8% higher than what they say. If that's true, and it's a big if, to me, obvious, but if that's true, the argument goes that they're exaggerating the economic growth by 7 or 8%. They're saying we got 1% growth. They're saying we have flat growth. I say we have -6 or -7% recession with inflation, and that is inflationary depression. We're in it now.
That's crazy, because that's you're at -6, they're saying we're at 7. That's a significant difference, in the opposite direction. For the person that's watching, Jim, that's like, well, okay, I already have a house, I'm not out looking to get new mortgages, and I don't bank with these banks. For that person that thinks, well, this is so far away from me, what news do you have to make them understand that this affects everybody?
Is your paycheck secure? Is your company sound? Does your company have extraordinary debt? Is your company still hiring? Are they still with funding in order to produce products and services? Are they cutting back on employment? Are you likely to get a severance payout really soon? And as for your home, are you aware that you've got a 30% decline in the last 2 years on your home value? You may own it outright, but you might want to do a reverse mortgage and saddle your bank with the loss rather than yourself. Do you like the price inflation? How do you like your food quality? How do you like price inflation on food? Are you aware that a loaf of bread is triple what it was 5 years ago? Okay, it's touching everybody. Everybody is affected. If you're not affected, then you're not operating in the economy. Okay, some people think, well, my little micro economy is not affected by the macro economy. No, that's total nonsense. That's wishful thinking. That's fantasy. That's fantasy bullshit. Um, if you have a bad economy, you tend to have a lot of homeless. With a lot of homeless, you're going to get more break-ins. With a lot of homeless, you might get some carjacking. We're not going to be untouched. It's not like you have to, invite the homeless down the street for dinner. But I tell you, I did something once, and I was in San Diego on a business trip, and I was doing pretty well. I was in my late 30s and a young whippersnapper, statistical marketing research analyst, and I was on a trip to San Diego, and I went into I don't know whether, I think it was a Subway shop or a Quiznos shop or something like that for a sandwich. And I noticed that a rather healthy looking guy was out front, and he had a sign, and it said, please help. And he had a tin cup. I just stopped him and said, hey, you want a tuna sandwich with a Coca-Cola or iced tea? And he said, yeah, iced tea, that'd be great. 10 minutes later, I gave him a nice mid-sized tuna sandwich sub with an iced tea. Okay, we can do little things, but I'm not going to invite him and all of his friends over for dinner because they'll probably steal various things in my home. I don't want that kind of risk. The little things we can do. And don't donate to United Way. Wake the hell up, people. United Way has a 96% overhead. Their executives are driving limousines and Mercedes. 96% overhead. All right. We're in a situation, Alpha, where wherever there is big money, there is corruption. Wherever there's big money. I'm talking about even charities. United Way is horrible. The Red Cross has turned horrible. They're involved in Haiti for child abduction with the Clinton Foundation. That was 2013. Wherever there's big money, there's big corruption. It's like they get big, they get bigger, then they get invited to be into the cabal club. I've known only one billionaire, and that guy has had to deal with some rather unfortunate invitations to a secret society where they threatened him if he did not join. Okay, this is how they work. You get big and you get included or you get eliminated. Unbelievable. There are so many different hidden events going on right now. I'll just mention a few in scattered form. I believe Walmart is in forced divestiture right now. Walmart. They say they're shutting down stores because of limited supply chain provision, and they just can't keep the stores well supplied. Well, I don't buy that story. Their competitors are still operating. I think they've been nailed for child trafficking. They're integrated with FEMA and the underground tunnels to Walmart. Okay, another one that I heard, and this is subject to more confirmation. I heard that 4 different billionaires, and they're all friends of Donald Trump. They may have completed. It's not been publicized at all, and that could be a non-disclosure agreement with the acquisition. But Fox News apparently has been bought out by a group of 4, consortium. So look for a gradual conversion to the light, to the truth. And I believe one of their first acts and deeds was to work with Tucker Carlson to be on the pathway of being fired. Work with him. Allow him to get fired. Ask him, what do you think we could do together to arrange for your dismissal? and make it all high publicity. Okay, very interesting. Now, for those who don't know, Tucker Carlson is building a Substack and trying to monetize it eventually, I think. And it's going to be 10 times more revenue than he ever had before. So Fox News was holding him back. Okay, there's a lot of things going on. I don't know any major news networks that are being converted, but I believe that the social networks, except for Facebook, are losing their censorship. And by the time we get to the election, if we get that far, that should be a good item for our discussion here, Alpha. Will we get to the November election without incidents? I think not a chance. There are many different events going on that are not well known. Seattle is trying to bring back their police department. What a pack of morons, defunding the police. It seems only to be happening on the west or left coast. I know how it evolved. You've got unbelievable beauty in the west coast. You've got forests that are worth preserving. You've got people who love hiking. You have people who want to protect the environment, but this is going completely out of hand where the West Coast is being dominated by a pack of morons, a large pack of morons. Anyway, probably better not to discuss the politics of things. I really want to discuss with you about this bond problem and the election and how it might be interwoven.
And I want to cover that too. One question I have, and because bringing up secret societies and the cabal and the central banks, and what you were talking about here, and where there's large money, there's always going to be corruption. I'll say one of the most popular questions that I get from my audience every week is, well, is gold and silver commodities good? Is central banking good? Or does the cabal control both of them? What does it look like? Because a lot of people think that before going into this, where we want to talk about with the elections and major incidents, a lot of people think that our economy is going to collapse before we make it to the election cycle. And they're trying to figure out, which direction do I go in before that happens?
All right. So people are concluding that's evidence of smarts. They figured that out. We're not going to make it to next November. Okay, you mentioned central banks and you mentioned gold. Okay, let's cover that. Central banks are not good. That's a very simple statement. Central banks subvert the free market process for determining interest rates. Why do we permit that? We permit it because a bunch of billionaires created the central bank and have dominated policy. So they tell their friends, we're going to tighten, so it'd be a good idea to sell your bonds. They tell their friends later, we're going to loosen, so it's a good idea to buy back your bonds and to buy stocks. What it does is it creates an upper class of insider trading. And in addition to that, after they disconnected the gold anchor to the dollar in 1971, little known is that the owners of the Fed have granted themselves near 0% loans for perhaps 20 or 30 trillion dollars. That's a theft. Okay, in the wake